38 people watched a woman get stabbed to death, and not one of them called the police. That is what America was told. And for 50 years, almost everyone believed it. Welcome back to Crimson Noir Files, where we cover the cases that stay with you long after the video ends. If you are new here, hit subscribe right now, because this one is different. I have covered a lot of dark cases on this channel. This one genuinely changed me. It is March 13th, 1964, Kew Gardens, Queens, New York, a quiet residential neighborhood. The kind of place with apartment buildings, front stoops, neighbors who know your name. Ordinary, safe, or at least it looks that way. At 3:15 in the morning, a 28-year-old woman named Kitty Genovese pulls her red Fiat into the parking lot near her apartment. She has just finished a late shift managing a bar. She parks about 100 feet from her front door. 100 feet. Think about that for a second. She never makes it inside. A man has been following her car through the streets of Queens that night. She does not know that yet. But here is the thing. He had already chosen her at a traffic light miles away, before she even turned onto her street, before she even parked. She was already a target and had no idea what happened next would not just end her life. It would trigger a national conversation about human decency, urban apathy, and the psychology of crowds. It would reshape how scientists understand human behavior. It would put a number in every textbook in America. 38 witnesses. But that number? It came from one conversation between a police commissioner and a newspaper editor over drinks, and nobody checked it. That is the part nobody teaches you in class. But before we get to that number, before we get to the newspaper, the psychology textbooks, the national outrage, you need to know who Kitty Genovese actually was. Because she deserves that. She deserves more than being a case study. Catherine Susan Genovese, born July 7, 1935 in Brooklyn, New York, the oldest of 5 kids in an Italian-American family. By 28, she was managing a bar in Queens, working double shifts, saving money. She had a plan, an Italian restaurant, her own place. She was building something. And that night, March 13, 1964, was not just any night for Kitty. It was exactly 1 year since she had met Mary Ann Zelonko, the woman she loved and shared an apartment with in Kew Gardens. 1 year. She was coming home to celebrate that. Hold on. Think about that for a second. She parked her car. She was 100 feet from her front door, 90 seconds from being home safe, from being with the person she loved most. And this is the part that still gets me every time I come back to this case. She never made it through that door. And the woman who loved her, Mary Ann, was inside that apartment, waiting. But here is where the story takes a turn nobody talks about. Because after Kitty was killed, investigators did not focus on finding her attacker. They focused on Mary Ann for 6 hours. 6 hours. While a killer was still out there somewhere, police sat Mary Ann Zelonko in a room and questioned her about her relationship with Kitty, her grief, her loyalty, her alibi, because in 1964, being a woman who loved another woman made you a suspect first and a victim second. And I mean that. They eventually let her go. No charges, no evidence, nothing. Now here is where the story shifts. Because while investigators were looking in the wrong direction entirely, a man named Winston Moseley was going about his life, completely free. No one knew his name. No one was looking for him. Moseley was 29 years old, married, a father of 2. He had a regular job, and on the night he followed Kitty's red Fiat through the streets of Queens, he had already made a decision about what he was going to do. He had been driving around looking for a victim, any victim, but that detail, the randomness of it, is not what makes this case so disturbing. He attacked Kitty at 3:15. In the morning, in the parking lot near her building, she screamed, loud enough that a neighbor shouted from an upstairs window, "Leave that girl alone," and Moseley ran. Kitty, badly wounded, staggered around the corner into a back vestibule, out of sight, alone. And then he came back. If you are still with me, and I am glad you are, make sure you are. Subscribe to Crimson Noir Files, because what happens in the next part of this story is the detail that changes. Everything you thought you knew. 2 weeks. That is how long it took for this story to stop being about a murdered woman and start being about her neighbors. On March 27, 1964, the New York Times ran a front-page article. The headline, 38 who saw murder didn't call the police, written by a reporter named Martin Gansberg. And within days, that number, 38, was everywhere, radio, television, dinner, table conversations across America. People were furious, heartbroken, disgusted, and on the surface that fury made complete sense, except the number was not real. Here is where that figure actually came from. Police Commissioner Michael Murphy had a private conversation with the Times editor, A.M. Rosenthal. Murphy mentioned the witnesses. Rosenthal handed it to Gansberg, and Gansberg ran it on the front page without independently verifying a single name. Not one. The neighbors of Kew Gardens woke up and found themselves called monsters by the most powerful newspaper in America, based on a number nobody could actually source. And the more I sit with that, the angrier I get, because those were real people, real families, living in real apartments. Some of them had actually tried to help. Sophia Farrar was 70 years old. She ran down to Kitty and held her in her arms while she died. That woman existed. The Times just left her out entirely. But here is the part that genuinely stopped me cold when I first read it. In 2007, 43 years later, a peer-reviewed journal formally found no evidence that 38 witnesses even existed. The lie had already been in every psychology textbook in America for 4 decades. And the Times? They did not admit the story was, in their own words, flawed until 2016, which raises one more question nobody has fully answered yet. Winston Moseley. That is the question nobody spent enough time on. Because while the entire country was arguing about 38 neighbors, debating urban apathy, pointing fingers at queens, reshaping psychology departments, Moseley was arrested 6 days after Kitty's murder, not for her killing, for a routine burglary, and when detectives sat down with him, he confessed, voluntarily, no pressure, just offered it up. And then he told them something else, something that had nothing to do with Kitty Genovese at all. He had killed 2 other women before Kitty, cases that were sitting open, unsolved, with no suspects. And he just told them, like it was nothing. No one had been looking for him. No one even knew those 3 cases were connected. And this is the part that never really goes away for me. If he had not walked into that burglary, if he had not been caught for something completely unrelated, we may never have known his name at all. Hold on, think about what that means. A man who killed at least 3 women went completely undetected because investigators and a newspaper were too consumed by a story about silent witnesses to look at the actual killer clearly. Moseley was sentenced to death. That sentence was later reduced to life in prison. He died behind bars on March 28, 2016. He was 81 years old. He had served 52 years. He never showed remorse that anyone around him found convincing. The case is officially closed. But it is not over, because the 38 witnesses' story is still out there, still being repeated, still appearing in classrooms. The correction never travels as far as the original lie. It never does. And somewhere in this country right now, a college student is reading a psychology textbook that tells them 38 people watched Kitty Genovese die and did nothing, and they will believe it, because the New York Times said so in 1964, and that is apparently enough. Kitty Genovese deserved better than to become a myth. She deserved to be remembered as a person. 28 years old, hard-working, loved, walking home. That is who she was. If this story stayed with you, share it. Because Kitty Genovese deserves to be remembered for who she was, not for the lie that was built around her death. I want to ask you something directly. Do you think the Times ever truly took responsibility for what that story did to those neighbors? Drop your answer in the comments. I am genuinely asking. And if you are new to Crimson Noir Files, welcome. We cover the cases that refuse to let go. Subscribe and stay with us. She was 100 feet from her front door.